I don't know. That's my question. What is strong?
Mr. Donovan, I won't be here on Monday. I'm going to be and on Wednesday. I'm going to Costa State. So can I come in during advisory on Thursday or Friday and take the quiz?
Why not Tuesday?
Homework? Tuesday I'm gone too. It's gone for 2 nights, so it's all of Monday through Wednesday.
Yeah, if you just want to sign up primetime Thursday, that would be good.
Okay, perfect.
You too.
I never thought about that criteria thing from English yesterday. It was an easy point, but I don't know. Okay, I'm not good at reading.
You also didn't turn in your math homework.
I did, didn't I?
No. I just graded them.
I'm sure I did.
I turned mine in. I mean, you can still turn it in, but
I'll go back. I'll post you later.
86.
No, I didn't. It was done too.
Well, it's not late for another couple minutes.
Yeah, I'll just turn it in physically then. But I could have done it. I sworn I'd done it because I thought I turned it in the same time you did. What? No, you took pictures, didn't you? That wasn't like Tuesday.
Thank you.
Yeah? I don't know.
Probably sucks when you gotta leave.
Alex, Smart, Naomi.
Now it's done.
Business. Your contact. Lucia. 212 bridge. Jacob All right, if you guys did not turn in your homework, the book assignment from last class, number 86, I need you to either turn that in the Google Classroom right now or bring me your hard copy. I need that before we get going here. to not take late credit on it. All right, and our lesson today is going to be pretty short. I think I mentioned last class that normally we do this section in just one day, book assignment and practice quiz in one day. I don't know why Miss Thomas, who's the other pre-cal teacher, planned it out over 2 days this year, but I mean, I guess if anything, that makes it easier on y'all. So the handout you picked up on the way in is 87, and that's the only thing we need to do today, so we can do a good job with it. So what I'm going to ask you to do is spend about 30 minutes or less, the first 30 minutes, just working through it. Treat it like a practice quiz. Don't look at your notes. Don't help each other out. Just see how you do. And then when 30 minutes is up, everybody should be finished, and then I'll go over the whole thing. And then, of course, that will help you identify what you may need to study. So even though we're not quizzing that today, we will quiz that next class, which will be Monday. And, of course, with the weekend between, there's a good chance you're not going to think about that again. So the 2 tips I would give you today is set a reminder to remind yourself about the quiz on Monday. And once we go over this worksheet, this practice quiz, circle the questions you struggled with or missed, and then you'll know what you need to review. So I already set the timer. So again, I don't think it'll take you 30 minutes, but 30 minutes from now we'll start to go over it. And that's it for today. So should be pretty easy. You just late or you have a pass?
Sorry?
Are you late?
Yes.
Function is also its inverse is also. trustworthy?
Okay. I didn't wait quite 30 minutes, but it looks like you guys are finished, or at least slowing down on the parts that you might have needed help with. So I do have the answers on my website, so if you took it upon yourself to go and check your answers and you know which ones you need to pay attention to, that's great. Otherwise, you probably should follow me here for about 10 minutes and make sure that everything looks correct. All right, so question 1 gives us a bunch of points on a function and asks us to give some points on the inverse. So for this, you simply need to know that inverse means you swap x and y. So negative 9, 4 becomes 4, negative 9. Negative 6, 3 becomes 3, negative 6. Just switch x and y. I'm not sure why there's so many points, but I'd say one common error here is sometimes students make something negative. This has nothing to do about negative signs, negative values. You're swapping the input with the output. You're swapping x and y. Okay, question 2, verify that these are inverses using composition of functions. So on the left, it wants you to plug g into f. So instead of 4x minus 12, it's 4 times all of this stuff plus 12. Now, the point of this question is for you to show that this is happening. So you can't just do this in your head, you have to show the work. But you could distribute the 4, undo the plus 12 with the minus 12, and it comes out to be x, like it's supposed to. But you have to show it both directions. So you also have to show f being plugged into g. So 1/4 that stuff plus 3. Distribute the 4th. Take the plus 3 minus 3. And your work should show that plugging each of these into each other simplifies to x. Plugging them into each other is called composition of functions. Question 3 can have lots of different answers, so the answers I come up with are probably different than yours, but to be one-to-one, what has to be true of yours is it has to pass the vertical line test and horizontal line test. So anything that you drew that passes both of those would be perfectly fine. My advice would be don't overcomplicate it. Make it something easy. That passes vertical and horizontal line test. A is a little trickier. There's part of this is a little tricky. Because it says a function, to be a function, it has to pass the vertical line test. To not be one-to-one, it has to either fail the vertical line test or the horizontal line test. So for this one, they wanted to pass the vertical line test to make it a function, but then fail the horizontal line test to make it not one-to-one. So anything you want to draw that passes the vertical line test but not the horizontal line test would be correct. I would just use something like x squared personally. If you were not sure if yours is good enough, I would be happy to look at it individually at the end of this. All right, question 4. Mine's got some extra stuff here that I took off because you shouldn't need these directions to do this, but find the inverse of this and then answer some stuff about it down here. So to take a function and to find his inverse, you should swap x and y like we did on question 1. And then you need to solve for the new y. So undo the -1 with the +1, undo the square with the square root, and y shouldn't equal two different things. Y shouldn't equal this and this. So try not to call your answer y, try to call it the inverse of f. Do y'all have a question about this one? Okay, what I would do to go above and beyond here, this would give me some confidence that this was correct. There's nothing stopping you from on the test or quiz graphing this. This looks like x squared minus 1. But this is saying x squared minus 1 is not one-to-one. So I couldn't ask you to find its inverse function, and that's the purpose and why this is needed mathematically. It's saying only keep the part where x is equal to 0 or greater than 0. So the part that they ask you to keep is one-to-one, which is why its inverse is a function. But if you graphed this, even if it wasn't asked of you, and you graphed this, this would look like the square root of x shifted left 1. Why should this picture give you an idea if this is correct or not? Right, there's a line of symmetry at y equals x, which is a characteristic of inverse functions. So if you're willing to graph that, you can feel good about that answer at that time. Likewise, you could do this, and I'm not 100% sure why they put this on here, because again, this worksheet has been made up long before I was teaching pre-calculus. But if you plug in 0 into the function, you get -1. If you plug in 1, you get 0. And if you plug in 2, you get 3. Why I think that might be helpful, even if it didn't ask you to do that, is going back to question 1 on the front page. If you know some points on a function, you should know a few points on the inverse. And so if you think this is the inverse, that means if I plug in -1, it's supposed to give me 0. If I plugged in 1, it's supposed to, or 0, it's supposed to give me 1. And if I plugged in 3, it's supposed to give me 2. And if that wasn't true, then I would know something was wrong with this being my inverse function. So I think that might be what they're going for here with this table. Hello? Okay, thanks. You're checked out. Okay, for the domain piece, and we did not talk about this in your notes last class, but I know it came up in one of your vocab questions. If you think about the domain and range of this guy, so the domain is this. They're telling you just do 0 to infinity, values that are bigger than 0. And if you think about the graph, the range is -1 to infinity. Well, to go from a function to an inverse, this would be the function. All an inverse function means is you're swapping x and y. You're swapping input with output. So that also means you're swapping possible x's to possible y's. The domain becomes the range, and possible y's become possible x's. We used that a lot last semester when we did inverse trig functions. So that's how I would figure out that domain. The domain of the inverse is the same as the range of the function. And since we should know what that graph looks like without a calculator, we should know what its range is. But again, I'm 99% sure this was part of the vocab, but otherwise it wasn't asked in your book assignment. Make sure you know that relationship between those two. Okay, question 5 is just like question 1. I think the only difference is it's not in words, it's with math symbols. But if you've got 3 points on a function, swap the input with the output, and you've got 3 points on the inverse. I'm going to come back to question 6 because it's probably the most commonly missed question, and go down to number 7, which is basically vocab. It says the graph of a function must pass the vertical line test. Passing the vertical line test is what makes it a function. If the graph of a function passes the horizontal line test, then its inverse is a function. That's the point of the horizontal line test. And if it passes both, you need to know that's called one-to-one. Okay, and for question 6, what tends to throw people off here is you need to try to come up with a function that does not have an inverse function. Well, if you're trying to come up with a function, that means your answer better pass the vertical line test. So look at your answer. If it passed the vertical line test, it's a function. But we want it to not have an inverse function, which means he needs to fail the horizontal line test. The other requirement is that it needs to be odd. So the parts of this you would need to remember from last semester. We haven't talked about even, odd in a while. But even functions like x squared are symmetric to the y-axis, whereas odd functions like x cubed, we call that symmetric to the origin, or 180-degree rotation, or turn your paper upside down. So for this question, you had to try to think of something that had this type of symmetry that passes the vertical line test but fails the horizontal line test. And typically students just give up a little bit too quick. So if you think of x cubed, that's a function, it's odd, but it passes the horizontal line test, so his inverse is a function. But you can quickly just tweak this a little bit. If you make this come like maybe come down a little bit before it goes up, and then to keep the symmetry, make it go up a little bit before it goes down. This is an odd function because it's symmetric to the origin. It's a function because it passes the vertical line test, but I drew something that failed the horizontal line test, which means it does not have an inverse function. So it is possible for number 6. But you have to remember the type of symmetry odd functions have. You have to make sure it passes the vertical line test to make it be a function. You have to understand why it can't pass the horizontal line test, and you have to stick with the question long enough until you come up with an example that does that, because there are examples that do that. Another example would be sine, the sine function. If you remember what that graph looks like, it's an odd function that doesn't pass the horizontal line test, so that would be acceptable as well. Okay, so my 2 reminders, and then I'll open it up if there's any of this you want a little bit more clarification on. I would circle the questions that you struggled on, where we're not clear to you, because that's what you should study, I would set a reminder that we've got a quiz first thing on Monday. And is there any of this you want some follow-up on? Yes.
3.
So number 3 has lots of different answers, but for this one, to be a function, it has to pass the vertical line test. So anything you want to draw that passes the vertical line test passes that. But then to not be one-to-one, it has to fail one of these two. So the only option is horizontal line test. So you just need to draw something that fails the horizontal line test. It doesn't have to be this exact graph, but you have to come up with something that passes this test and fails this test. Over here, this one wants a function that is one-to-one. So to be one-to-one, it needs to pass horizontal and vertical. So again, you could have, there's millions of different answers here. Just draw, try not to overcomplicate it. Anybody else? All right, again, so it's in your interest to know this for the quiz on Monday, but also remember that really we're doing this couple days here to help you out when we get to logarithms. After we finish the quiz on Monday, we'll jump into section 3.1, review what an exponential function is, how to know what their graphs look like, be able to describe some of the stuff about it, work a couple application questions. But then we'll go on to logarithms, and logarithms are really just the inverse of exponentials. So if you understand what you're supposed to know about exponentials, and you know what it means to be an inverse function, you automatically know a little bit about logarithms before we start talking about it together. Okay, if you guys do find any other questions, of course I would be happy to help out. Just let me know.